So let's have our first speaker. The professor has a degree in physics by the Campinas University, has also a master and a doctorate in physics by the Campinas University, and also has a doctor. He's also a doctor at the University of Madrid, also the Max Planck Institute in Stuttgart, and I was the associated professor at the University of Campinas. He has experience in condensed matter, and he now is working in systems of low dimensionality and its properties of electronic transport. And more recently, he has been working in dissemination of scientific issues such as nanoscience and science symmetry. He's the curator of the expositions of So Far and So Close about telecommunications and society. And he's now the professor of applied science of Unicamp. So Peter Schulz has the floor. 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Williams for the invitation, for this opportunity to speak to you and to make a resumption or an abstract of this curriculum. There is something important I have to say. That is, my main activity is hard science. I'm a theoretician in physics, in nanotechnology, but in the last few years I've been dedicating more in activities of scientific dissemination. So I'm a kind of a hard scientist that's becoming softer. So this is an important perspective and has to do what I'm about to tell you. Another information that's very important is that this the vice directorship that I have, it's a new department of this university, and it is a department by itself. It's a science of sports, 8 departments, and is anchored in the core of humanities that's common to all. And it's also a university, Unicamp, that despite the fact that it's being more known in its research activities, now it's in a program of interdisciplinary training for students of NA. Let's see what's happening in NA this year because of the problems we had. But the 120 best students of public schools of the Campinas region, they will go into university to learn physics, music, linguistics, philosophy, whatever, in a basic course of 2 years. And then they can choose, I want to go to medicine, I want to go to physics, philosophy, economy, etc. It is not a leveling program. It is an attempt to try to change the conception. At 17, I should know that I want to be an engineer of industrial automation. No, at 17, you do not know. 19, 20, maybe, but after you see a number of different things. So this is the perspective. I think it's important so that it becomes more clear in terms of what I have to present to you too. So the theme of my presentation is the challenge of a really interdisciplinary training. To talk about nanotechnology, this term has consolidated itself the last 20, 30 years. But let me go back a little bit into history because it is very necessary to understand the theme. The milestone, the foundation of modern science, not with Galileo Galilei, but with the first organization, first scientific organization, the Royal Society, the organization of research as a human activity. And not think of science as its first product, that maybe you can go back to the times of Galileo Galilei. But specifically, the society was founded launch in the Annals of the Royal Society. This is actually a copy. Well, I'm not very good at this. Wait a second. This is the first volume of 1665, and you can have access to the copies of these old editions. There is a bank, the J Store. It's very interesting because this magazine is totally multidisciplinary. There was not a division so marked as it is today at that time, and the language is very common for any person that reads of biology, geology at this time. So it's an observation that will make sense. However, Royal Society was created in London in 1865 and introduced sciences in the syllabus of the English public schools. And this was done by William Sharp in 1850, almost 2 centuries afterwards. O que você falou? Well, in terms of modern science, the scientific method had 2 centuries. And we talk about nanoscience that has its 20, 30 years. And we have an urgency to create these graduation courses with. So the science as we know it today, it was started to be taught 2 centuries after it began being institutionalized. And we are with the challenge of the training in nanoscience because it's right at the beginning of its construction. It's very different. In a general way, the evolution of science as a human practice, I can divide in these key expressions. Initially, it's voluntary. Nobody was paid for that. Nobody was paid to be physics, chemistry, or biology. It was like a hobby to be a science. And a few universities had mecenas, and people were rich, and then therefore they could afford that kind of education. It had a very slow institutionalization beginning in 1665. It was informal, this education in the beginning. It was like master apprenticeship relationship. And we have this type of relationship today in the graduation courses. Besides, the privileged space for science is the university, research, and university and research was founded with a manifest of guidelines, internal and externals, in University of Berlin, 1810. So where we do research, of course, we have the institutes of research and industries, etc. But in Brazil, it's something that it came really a long time after science as a human activity. And then it was disseminated in the public schools, in the elementary and middle school levels. But there is a problem. There's a problem I always have to like to bear in mind, at least the last few years. To properly analyze, as it was in this article, the public understanding of science, the academic magazine that deals with this problem, but it's about the genealogy of how the professionalization of activity scientific, how the language between the layman and the scientific man have created this large gap. And this is seen for us very natural as those of us that work in the hard science, but we do not reflect enough about this theme. In this context, nanotechnical science. Why nanotechnical science? Because the development of it as a science, it needs its own technological products. Nobody can say that a tunneling microscope is it's not a technological product that was developed at the same time with the basic science around itself. Well, very well. So that's why I'm calling it nanotechnical techno science. And what happens here is that this article in the Nature Nanotechnology 2008, it has breached an important issue. Is nanotechnology an example of a new approach in science and technology? And then the other phrase is a theme of discussion here. What kind of a new form of science or knowledge production is this? This is something that's being very much discussed. We talk about mode two of production of knowledge. You can see on Google. So peer review is very important. So mode two of production of all knowledge. This is something that may consolidate itself outside of the walls of the academia, maybe a demand placed by society. And the appreciation by the peers, of course, is important to regulate the quality of the activity, but we do seek other types of motivation, maybe some product outside the academic world. And nanotechnology is disciplinar by nature. Here we see that issues that it breaches are of interest to various social agents outside academia. So this is a very good example of this mode two of production of knowledge. This interdisciplinarity can be verified when you read the indexes or the specialized magazines such as this one. Nanotechnologies goes material property, material synthesis, quantum physics, processing methods as engineering. Let me call your attention to one point here. A great thinker of the interdisciplinary, Julie Thompson Klein, to resume here, she argues that any activity, interdisciplinary activities, has a complex network of historical, social, psychological, political, economic, philosophical, intellectual factors. We cannot think of a new scientific activity without thinking of how the different parts will dialogue among themselves and what will be the product. Especially the disciplinarity, it is a complicated theme because when you professionalize science, you also go into a discipline. We talk about all of these different terms, interdisciplinary, non-disciplinary, disciplinarity, and all of these definitions, they are a little bit not very hard definitions. But I like this definition, that interdisciplinary involves the attack of a subject from various angles and methods, taking finally to overtake the disciplinary limits and for the new methods for the understanding of the subject in issue. When you put two scientists to have like between isolated individuals, isolated scientists to develop a common language is very difficult, and I don't think there is a concern. People are not concerned about finding mechanisms to see if we can improve this dialogue. We're just putting things on top of another to see if things do happen. So my challenge to you is a higher learning education, formal, in an environment strongly disciplinary for a new mode of production of knowledge that's interdisciplinary. So we are conceiving this interdisciplinary based on our own disciplinarity. If we want to aggregate physics, biology, and chemistry, so our idea is to create a few new courses and regulate. No, but this is not it. This is the new production of knowledge, so we have to take that into account. And the answers to this challenge, we have several answers. Thinking of graduation in nanotechnology, this is an example of a state university in New York, in the United States, an example in Europe, which is the University of Basel, that's associated with the Nanotechnology Institute of that country. So when we read the brochures to introduce the courses, they're very similar among them. The first college to offer a comprehensive baccalaureate program in nanoscience, etc. This nanoscale science, a funny way of putting it, because every speaker in nanotechnology talk about the uh, the scales of size. So we haven't come out of saying that everything is very, very small. This says 1 to 10 is 100 nanometers. Is there someone here say the astrophysics? Does anybody comment that it's physics of from 2 to 3 parsecs? No, we talk about the phenomena of astrophysicians deal with, of what it explains, what it questions. We do not have that so clear in nanoscience or nanotechnology. When we talk about that, we started by saying, oh, well, it's 10 to the minus 9 in size. If the scale was so important to define this activity, it's because it has not consolidated itself epistemologically. I like that phrase. I just invented it. The syllabus of the State University of New York, it's something that you can go into the site and have a look. You have the program, regular program, physics 1, 2, 3, chemistry 1, 2, 3, biology, etc. A few practices that try to put this together. But there is something that's interesting here. Is that we have 4 disciplines and that they look at the humanities. One is a general introduction of nanotechnology. One about disruptive nanotechnology. I'm talking about technologies that break the established paradigm, and also economic impacts of nanotechnology and social impacts as well. But let me insist, it is a discipline in case of the social impacts. This has nothing to do about the epistemology of this new science. And this epistemology of a new science does not appear by spontaneous generation. I think there should be a more concentrated effort for that. This is the program, and then in the brochure you can download the course, the presentation of the course, or the Swiss program. And then it follows the Bologna protocol, 3 years. We have biology, morphology, biology of the organism, biochemistry, genetics, morphology number 2, etc. Chemistry, chemistry 1, practice, physics, chemistry, organic chemistry. Gee, this is any chemistry course will have that anyway. Mathematics 1 and 2 and 3. I have no idea what they cover, but I couldn't get into details. I'd have to visit the place. Physics. And then they have a few disciplines in nanoscience, practical disciplines. You can do disciplines in nanoscience or nanotechnology because you have several contents of this. And you have the elective disciplines, mathematics 4, bioenergetic 1, inorganic chemistry 1, bioorganic chemistry, practical quantum mechanics, etc. You can see there's no humanities whatsoever there. And here, the Swiss are what they are, so that they have a pie chart, for the fundamental part of the course, what's the proportion of the course in biology and chemistry, etc., nanoscience, and their optional courses. And for the curriculum of 2010, and it appears Antewandte Ethics, it's applied ethics. And this has appeared in this reformulation of this discipline that ethics is probably something important. I'm using this tone as slightly irony, but it's to provoke you. This is, I think I have to be, because it has to be discussed in depth, and I'll give you an example of this. This is a table that appears in an article of 2008 that will be referred to later on. I put it together last night because I thought it was very interesting. There's the compilation of the graduation, master's, and doctorate courses that we have in the world at that time. So in Brazil, we have the Federal University of ABC, the doctorate, the UNIF of master. They didn't add Urbis or UFRJ. But what's interesting is this. Yesterday we had a comment here of an Australian researcher about regulation, and apparently surveying the set of courses. I think that's the theme with a certain privilege in Australia, because the number of graduation courses in Australia, in New Zealand, is extremely high if you compare to the rest of the world. Same thing happens in India. It's very impressive, their concern here, and the absence of China, for instance. I don't know if it was a mistake in their research, I don't know. But this number evidently has grown since then. And in Brazil, I was going to make a comment, but it's going to be commented afterwards. The example of the UFRJ, the Federal University of Rio, and the one of Rio Grande do Sul. But what you can see, without knowing the reality there, if the reality of Federal of Rio de Janeiro is similar to Unicamp, I believe it is, if you create a new course, then no congregation of your partner institutes will allow you to create a new discipline. You can have the chemistry one or whatever, we can't do it. It's a serious problem, you know. We're like in this binding situation. It's hard to discuss and to improve the disciplines. We do not have a discussion of a new production of knowledge. Multidisciplinary is by accumulation of commenters, put together disciplines. This agglutination of disciplines that already exist, because nobody wants to discuss, nobody allows in the administration of this university the issue of new disciplines, because it will increase the workload of teachers or whatever. And the trap posed by humanities as just as a complement and not as an essential part of the curriculum. This is a trap, because no one will refrain from being a competent hard scientist if you have, instead of one humanities discipline, you should have 5 or 6, like they do it in Harvard. And this is the asset that describes that list of disciplines, the courses that we have. This was presented in an international conference of education in engineering. So this is the conclusions. The attempt to introduce nanotechnology has been partially successful in the absence of coherent blah, 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 blah. And nobody discusses this coherent strategy, for instance. And a structured education, not only new content, but also about the acknowledgement that it is a new form of production of knowledge. And here, I can give you a parable, some way of comparing. So you have a convergence of content, this new technology, and the emergence of new world visions. In a brief manner, I'll give an example of that. You are in a fine arts class. I'll give you elements to compose a picture. The elements are aubergines or eggplant. It can be physics, let's say, carrots. That could be chemistry. And then onions. You can choose your own analogy. Tomatoes. And then a little bowl. We can find other things. What would you generate with this quote-unquote disciplines, these elements? What kind of curriculum are you going to have? most probably are going to have something like that, like a still nature, still life. And you see, when you see this type of fruit and vegetables, then it's a still life. So let's organize the still life then. Let's try to think of something else. Let's put it in a different position. The bowl before was overturned with everything falling out. Now let's put this upside down. See, this has complexity. So this is not something new. It's no longer the sum of the parts. It's something new. So that's how we have to think of our syllabus. 30 seconds, please. This is not news. I got a little bit disturbed here. There is an interesting document that's Educate the Engineer for 2020. It's not engineering and nanoscience or nanotechnology without engineering, be it mechanic, naval, or electronics. Technical excellence is the essential attribute of engineering graduates, but those graduates should also possess team communication, ethical reasoning, societal and global contextual analysis skills, as well as understand work strategies. To neglect the development in these arenas and try to do only the technical part, excluding the selection of humanities, economics, political science, language, and interdisciplinary technical subjects, is not in the best interest of producing good engineers. I'm not talking anything new here. I'm talking about things that people have disciplinary fields well established. They're already thinking about that. Now let's just skip this quote that I have from Joe, and I'll read you this. The training in a category, it's a category of learning that's in construction. I have a picture of the same painter here. I think it's very interesting. Let's imagine sailors in the high seas modifying their primitive vessel to transform the shell of its boat. They find wood, they found driftwood, but they can't put the boat in the dry dock to reconstruct from the beginning. So during their work, they remain in the old boat and they fight violent storms and huge waves. This is our destiny as scientists. This auto Neurath is very interesting. That's what we're doing. We're changing a boat and we have to add new things, but we cannot stop the boat and allow this forces, the storms and the waves. That's the difficulty of maintaining our boat as we change it. Thank you very, very much.